So we're in a very different situation now. This is an area of their farm that Steve and Judy have not had as long as the other area. As you can see, this area, you might describe it as a little wilder in appearance. It's got a lot of locusts growing up in here, a lot of ironweed and many other different thistle, you name it, a lot of brush and so forth. So, this is an example of how you can use just cattle as your tool and not have to bring in chemicals and other interventions to be able to transform land. So they're in the process of using cattle to help to transform this, and you can see that we're really going after the same type of impact. So we want to build up sufficient biomass, no matter what's growing in here. It doesn't matter. That's really irrelevant. It's biomass, it's plant material, and it can all become carbon. So as they come through here, you can see that we've got a really good degree of trample, and we are still protecting our soil moisture and soil temperature with this trample in spite of the very different appearance. Now you'll also note that on a lot of these taller growing weeds in here, like ironweed and giant ragweed, anything else that was in here, you see all these stalks and stems, and you note that the cattle have stripped the leaf material off of those. Now, these are plants that the majority of beef producers would tell you that cattle just simply won't eat. They're not going to take advantage of, and they would ignore. But yet, it's very, very evident here that as the whole herd moved through here, they were taking advantage of this and stripping every one of these tall forbs of their leaves. And right before the cattle moved out of here, I was watching what they were still doing, and both cows and calves were eating the leaves of all of these tall forbs. And we also saw them, of course, eating the leaves of these trees and saplings and so forth that are growing up in here as well. So they're taking advantage of every food source that is available out here. The beautiful thing about all of these taller forbs is that they're very deeply rooted, and they're able to pull up minerals from the soil that are much deeper than our quote, improved forage varieties can, like the fescue in here, and if there were any Bermuda grass or crabgrass or anything else like that growing in here, they're going to be much more shallow rooted compared to a lot of these other plants. And so these other plants are able to pull up minerals from much deeper strata in the soil. They're able to remineralize this soil and to really get that mineral cycle and water cycle kicking again. The other thing that they're doing for us is they are attracting a whole different array of microbial species underneath the soil that are helping us to rebuild the soil, repair it. They're producing biotic glues that are aggregating these soil particles and significantly improving the water infiltration rates over time. And they are also producing an array of those secondary plant metabolites that we talked about. So every one of these forbs that you see bitten off by cattle, that means that those animals were self-medicating and getting antiparasitics into their bodies. So they are actually helping themselves. Now, a lot of people may look across this and think that cattle grazing this are going to be more exposed to internal and external parasites. This is an area that you would put your cattle at risk in that regard, but actually it's quite the opposite. What we're doing here is these cattle, again, due to the self-medicating, those secondary metabolites, because of the much broader diversity of plant species out here, especially a much higher degree of forbs, this is actually significantly lowering that potential parasite and fly load on these cattle.
How is it that when we turn cattle into this is the biggest surprise we've had as we went to tall grazing and longer rotations, is we have all these mature forages in here. We've got seed heads everywhere, we've got different forbs and such, but you look at this and everything that I had been taught and all my thinking was we would be getting stacked manure, poor performance on these cows, from these cattle. And we obviously aren't. The cattle look as good as we've ever had, they're as content as they've ever been. And our manure looks like we're feeding the perfect feed.
You've got a lot of complexity and diversity out here. Now, I would imagine that the same university agronomist that told you that you didn't have much out here to feed your cattle also told you that this was a very, very weedy and brushy pasture and that you needed to do something, spray or mow or whatever, to get rid of all of this. Would that be correct? Okay. So what were they doing? Whoever he or she was, that agronomist, was doing what? Well, they were totally not considering the fact that your livestock actually would eat that.
Yeah.
They were discounting it as a plant that was inedible and had no nutritive value whatsoever, and also discounting the fact that that plant had incredible value in terms of building a new soil microbial array and building total soil health.
Plantain, chicory,
yes.
even Pennsylvania smartweed.
Yes. Or even your
love.
thistle here, or your ironweed over here, or your ragweed over there. All of that actually contributes to the total biological array, that microbial array beneath the soil surface. So they were totally discounting the power of compounding. You know, we call that the principle of compounding, and the fact that the more diversity and complexity you have in plants, microbes, and everything else, then the more you're going to be able to grow in terms of above ground biomass, and the more secondary metabolite nutritive value you're going to have in that. So they were totally they were viewing this as a fescue monoculture, in that this fescue growing here was the only thing that your cattle were even going to potentially eat.
Right. And essentially it's the only thing in here they really won't eat.
Now, how ironic is that?
Yeah.